Perfect. So a very, very warm welcome to the ICAO briefing session, Implementing a Clean Energy Transition for International Aviation in Support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm honored to have with me today the President of the ICAO Council, Mr. Salvatore Ciacchitano, and the Deputy Minister of Transport of Azerbaijan, Elmin Mammadov. Thank you both for being with here today. My name is Jane Hoopie. I am the responsible for the environmental program in ICAO, and I am the special envoy of the ICAO Secretary General to COP. And here's the plan. We are going to have a first keynote speech by the President of the Council. Then I will provide you an overview of how we are dealing with this clean energy transition in aviation. And after, I have the pleasure of having the state perspectives on clean energy and capacity building for international aviation from the Deputy Minister. And I have a surprise for you at the end. We are going to have a signing ceremony for Azerbaijan to come and join ICAO on Act SAF. With no more delays, Mr. President, may I ask you to take the floor? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. And good afternoon, everybody. Dear delegates to COP29, it's a pleasure for me today to address you in this ICAO briefing on the contribution of international civil aviation to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What is ICAO? ICAO is a UN specialized agency specialized in international aviation, composed by 193 states, and they are working all together in order to establish minimum standards and recommended practice that allow we all, to fly safely, securely, and environmentally sustainable civil aviation. The year 2024 is a special moment for ICAO. Next month, 7 December, will mark the 80th anniversary of ICAO and the signing of the Convention on International Civil Aviation, the so-called Chicago Convention. 8 decades. Defining international agreements has served as a fundament or foundation for the development of the global civil aviation system to the benefit of all nations. Indeed, international aviation provides multiple benefits to international community. It is essential for the connectivity of peoples and business, an essential driver for tourism, and a key enabler of development as it contributes to more than 3.5 trillion of the global GDP. If I say 3.5 trillion to the contribution of the global GDP, is not clear what is a figure. Is it corresponding to the GDP of France or the GDP of Germany? This is aviation as a sector. And of course creates more than 80 million jobs around the world. While aviation continues to play a pivotal role in global connectivity and economic growth, ICAO and its member states are piloting an ambitious environmental agenda with the objective of making aviation more sustainable and environmentally responsible. The work of ICAO on the environment contributes to 14 of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 13, which calls for urgent climate action. These SDGs are ICAO's common roadmap toward a sustainable future for the aviation sector. Under the leadership of ICAO, the international aviation sector is committed to addressing its impact on the global climate and is now fully committed to fully implementing its clean energy transition. At the last ICAO Assembly in 2022, member states agreed a collective global long-term aspirational goal for international aviation of net zero carbon emissions by 2050 in support of the Paris Agreement's temperature goal. As a sustainable aviation fuels, so-called SAF, and the clean energies will be the primary contributors to reducing aviation emissions, ICAO adopted last year a global framework to scale up the production, development and deployment of cleaner energies in all regions, while emphasizing the imperative that no country is left behind. The global framework set an ambitious target, reducing international aviation CO2 emissions by 5% by 2030 through the use of cleaner aviation energies. I wish to underline that 5% could be perceived not ambitious enough. But we have to consider that when the global framework was adopted last year, the production of SAF was very, very, very low. So in order to reach the production sufficient to reach the CO2, 5% of CO2 emission reduction by 2030, there is a need to scale up the production and to deploy SAF. The framework also provided clarity, consistency, and predictability to governments, investors, industry, and the fuel producers on the policies, regulations, implementation needs, and investments required to support and unlock the full potential of aviation sector's energy transition. Since the adoption of the framework, we are seeing an immense progress in SAF deployment and production in all regions, which we are monitoring through the ICAO Cleaner Energy Tracker tools. Mr. Seriupe will show in a few moments how this system can work. Is on our website, and you yourself can have access and to monitor how this production and this deployment of SAF is going to increase. For example, 136 airports are now distributing SAF globally, with more than 350 facilities engaged in SAF production. SAF is currently approved for up to 50% blending with the conventional jet fuel, and we aim for 100% SAF commercial operation in the near future. I mean, by 2030, the aviation industry, manufacturing industry, is committed to reach the certification of engines with a blend, no longer blend, actually 100% fuel SAF. Achieving the clean energy transition for aviation will require unprecedented efforts and collaboration towards capacity building support and access to financing for the production and use of sustainable fuels. Concrete support to states is also being provided through the ICAO Assistance Capacity Building and Training for SAF, called ACSAF, is the program that will be joined by Azerbaijan in a few moments, involving now over 200 states and organizations. This initiative provides essential support to states, such as exchange of best practices, training, policy development, and feasibility studies. More than 20 SAF feasibility studies are to be launched in the upcoming years. ICAO is also working on the operationalization of the Finvest Hub to facilitate access to financing and investments towards aviation decarbonization projects, including the development of a platform to connect aviation decarbonization projects developers with the public and the private investors. Indeed, the challenge is to connect investors, fuel producers and investors, with the aviation world in order to enhance the production of SAF. CORSIA, the carbon offsetting reduction scheme for international aviation, is also another success story. I'm delighted to acknowledge that as of today, 129 member states are voluntarily participating in the scheme, and more states are expected to participate in the future years. The high environmental integrity of CORSIA CO2 monitoring, reporting and verification system, by which 99% of the verification verified CO2 emissions are reported by states to ICAO annually, is a testimony of its success. This is a clear fundamental tool without which you cannot have an effective mechanism of offsetting if you don't have evidence and the certainty of what are the CO2 emissions globally. CORSIA also provides the important basis to facilitate the development and deployment of SAF and aviation clean energies through the globally harmonized frameworks for the assessment of the life cycle emissions values and the sustainability certification of such fuels. For sure, Mrs. Yuppe will give you more highlights on this. I can assure you that there is a strong political will at the global level to ensure that the aviation sector delivers on its clean energy transition toward net zero 2050. As I conclude my remarks, let me reaffirm that ICAO will continue to work in close cooperation with its 193 states and all relevant stakeholders to ensure aviation's safe and remarkably journeys towards its decarbonization future. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a great session. Thank you.
So, you have noticed by the President how much work is ongoing in ICAO, and I just want to highlight a few of the issues the President just mentioned by putting things in context and by showing you some figures that I'm sure are going to impress you. What we are seeing right now is a very exciting moment for aviation. We are one of the most difficult to abate sectors. That's how we see aviation. But we also have this objective of becoming your best example of how a hard-to-abate sector can become net zero. So you'll see all the actions that we have been put in place, let's see if I hope we have time at the end for a few questions as well to be a bit more interactive. So if we can start to see, as the President says, we contribute with 14 of the 17 SDGs. ICAO has put really global standards for noise, local air quality, CO2 emissions, and we work very hard on adaptation now for aviation. You can imagine with all the extreme climate events, how much aviation also will have to adapt. Turbulences, the load factor in an aircraft because of high temperatures. We have been deplaning passengers and cargo because of the high temperatures. De-icing in the north with some equipments that we have put in place for aviation sliding down. We have storm and dust storms in the Arab region. It's you can imagine that dust that comes from the desert has salt in it. And if that comes into a turbine of an aircraft, those are millions of dollars that are lost. So, and we cannot operate in many of those conditions. When you shut down one of the airports in the Caribbean or in the Pacific area because of weather conditions, those are millions of dollars and a lot of assistance that cannot reach those states. So this is very serious because, as the President says, this is a vehicle for development. So you stop the connection by air. In many of those countries, you stop the country. So that's, I want just to put that in perspective because I want you to remember that. If you forget all the things we say today, please tell your friends, every time that you take a plane now and you go up the plane and sit down, remember you're sitting down 18,000 of international standards that had to be agreed by 193 states and more than 80 organizations to become an international standard. So next time you tell a friend, you know how many standards are sitting on? 18,000. So, okay, to put in perspective, let's go to the next slide. Let me tell you the proportion of things, because sometimes we lose that proportion with very alarming news on aviation emissions, aviation growth, etc. In fact, through the IPCC, and we are one of the very single sectors that does have an IPCC report dedicated to aviation, the IPCC report 1998, we are 2% of the global emissions, but that's total aviation. We in ICAO, we only deal with international aviations. We don't deal with domestic aviation. Domestic aviation is under the remit of each state, like the road transport, the trains. Local aviation within the state is the remit of the state. But when you go from one state to the other, we have to harmonize those things, including on environment, accountability, etc. Measures in one state can highly impact how that sector is going to take place in another state. That's why we have ICAO in the first place. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to make sure that you understand. While ICAO is doing all the monitoring, verification, reporting of international emissions, and the President just mentioned the rate of compliance now and our success on our MRV. We have in place for 5 years under our CORSIA, which is the offsetting schemes. I'll talk about that. A very powerful MRV system. It means that any airline flying international has to report annually on the CO2 emissions from those flights. That is verified by a third-party verifier and is sent to the state where this airline is registered. The state has to put the information of all the airlines that are registered in that state together and send through a platform called the CCR to ICAO. We, in our side, well, the state verifies again, and we are in our side in ICAO, we verify again. We put all that information together to give you yearly the account of how many aviation emissions are being produced in tons of CO2. That is super serious, is third-party verified, and after 5 years of already implementing that MRV this year, we had 99% of compliance. 99% of our emissions, in fact, were submitted directly from states and verified by a third party. We only had to fill the gap, as we talk, with very few states. 1% of the emissions only. We had to fill the gap in the Secretariat, which is an accomplishment that for anyone that here deals with inventories and monitoring, etc., knows how hard that is. Okay, next slide, please. Let me just give you come very quickly with you through the journey that led us as we are right now. The first thing I want to highlight was in 2010 was when ICAO put its first goal forward. At the time, having a carbon neutral growth in a few years was something considered extremely ambitious. So in 2010, we said by 2020, aviation emissions will grow, aviation traffic will grow, but not aviation emissions. So we said carbon neutral growth from 2020, okay? That now might seem a little bit odd, but bear with me. We are very few sectors that continue to maintain that carbon neutral growth 2020 as something that does not allow aviation to continue to peak over 2020 before we reduce. So from that threshold, we are already going down. And you will see that we have new objectives as we went along. And 2 years ago, in fact, these last 2 years have been incredible because we had two historical decisions. 2 years ago, we had in the Assembly in 2022 the carbon net zero decision for a goal, aligning our sector with the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement. And while we were doing that, we had to put a big study out called the Long-Term Aspirational Goal Study that looked in all the possibilities within aviation to really decarbonize. What happened in that study came out very clearly that cleaner energies was the element that will make us really get to the net zero. So we had, since the Assembly, invested very hard in accelerating action on clean energy. I'll talk about that. But then we had a conference last year where we had defined a shorter term goal just for the use and deployment of such fuels. We said by 2030, 5% of our reductions from aviation will have to on CO2 from aviation will have to come by the use and deployment of sustainable fuels. That means that we have to produce much more fuel to get to that 5% CO2 emissions reductions as we base that on a life cycle basis. So very important milestones since 2010. We have action plans that we decided to do. I have close to 150 states developing their action plan, talking about their action on how they are going to tackle aviation. That's very important because they have to know what they can do so that we can help them better. So I will not continue talking on that slide specifically, but let me just do the two highlights. I talked to you about the long-term aspirational goal to next year. Next slide, yeah. So that was in 2022. We had said we have a few streams that we have to follow. Technology is one. You are seeing the revolution we are doing with aviation. We have smaller routes now already working on electric aircraft. We are looking, we already have thousands of flights using sustainable aviation fuels on a 50% basis. We are looking into hydrogen very closely. It's a longer term solution, but we think that by 2040s we will be able to see that solution in place. We are moving on the sustainable aviation fuels from 50% to 100% SAF into the tanks. And we are putting an enormous framework to accelerate all of that. And we will talk about that. So the next slide is that conference that the president mentioned last year was in Dubai, UAE, just before the COP. And that conference was so important because you will see that for us, it was very important to realize that the clean energy transition was a marathon, right? But in that marathon, we decided that we would all reach the net zero by 2050, that we would have goals, etc. But not everybody was leaving the starting point at the same time. That's a reality. Some of our states are already flying with sustainable aviation fuels. Some are already producing, and some states were still looking at, wow, maybe I can produce. What's the difference? You know, while we have two handfuls of states that can produce aviation fuels from fossil fuels, we want to have 193 states producing cleaner energy for aviation. That's the potential we have that. And it's not a wish, it's a need. For us to reach that goal, we will have to have everybody producing. And one of the big commitments we had in the conference was that no country was going to be left behind, that we're going to put in place the element of finance and capacity building with the same weight that we were agreeing on the goal itself. So it's a package. The policies and the framework would have to be in place. We would be working very hard to have all those elements in the framework, in the regulatory framework for states, helping them put their policies, etc. But then we would put a program for really pushing the financing for the clean energy and the capacity building. And I'll talk more about that. But let's take a look at the GIFAF elements so that you understand. We have 4 elements that compose that framework. And those elements are super important to understand because they have to be all balanced, as I just said to you. So we cannot just say, oh, let's achieve that goal. We push for the goal, we agree on the goal, but we don't put the capacity building, we don't put the finance. So how can states do it? They cannot do it if they don't receive the necessary support. And that is why the GIFAF was so important. It talked about sustainable aviation fuels, low carbon fuels, and any other cleaner energies that we could work with to make that a reality. And it's not only in the air, it's on the ground as well. I'll give you an example. So we have been implementing a lot of programs, solar to the gate, we call. Why? For a regional flight, you have to stay in the gate with the aircraft, with the air conditioner turned on, and all the electricity, etc., for 45 minutes. Where does that energy come from? Usually it's from something called the APU, that is in the tail of the aircraft, but uses the fuel from the aircraft. And if it's fossil fuel, that is running on fossil fuel on the ground. We don't need to do that anymore. We can use solar to the gate. and do all of that 45 minutes at the gate. If it's an international flight, which is the ones that we account for, it's 2 hours preparations usually. Can you imagine every single flight, 2 hours of energy running? So we have many solutions on the ground. We can tug the aircraft with cleaner energy on the ground by pushing those aircrafts. We can release more the traffic so we have less congestion on the ground, etc., etc. So we are doing a lot on the ground as well. It's not only in the air. It's very important to see that. But I want to tell you something. One big decision by the Assembly and by the GFAF was monitoring. You don't measure, you don't show, you don't prove. And we wanted to say, we want to go, but we want to be able to measure it. We need to measure it to see if we are going to the right direction. If we have to do something that will put us in the right direction in case it's not, right? So we start monitoring. Right now we're doing a huge work for that we call LMR, which is the long-term monitoring and reporting for all the elements, but also SAF. That methodology will be approved at September next year, endorsing by the Assembly. But in the meantime, we have put something very cool for tracking everything. It's what we call the ICAO tracker tools. And I hope that works. If it doesn't, please, please, please take a look at the web yourselves afterwards, because it's super cool. And it's an immense amount of work running behind the scenes for you to see what you'll be seeing now. Tetsui, can we try to put the tracker tools there? So basically what we have many tracker tools that tells you, based on the announcements that are made, how many policies are in place for sustainable aviation fuels, how many airports are operating with those fuels now, how many. So that's the page. And if you go down, you have that same slide that you saw. And if you click on those things, behind the scenes is this immense database that you can see as well what you are looking at. So if you look at the policies, for example, Tetsui, can you try? So on the first one, so that's the tracker of the policies. And then you will have a map where you see all the policies that are around the world already specific for sustainable aviation fuels. So if you are a state that still don't have a policy and you want to get inspiration and you want to see, not invent the wheel, but see how things are being done, here's a lot of policies. Of course, we have many other materials. We have guidance published, documentation published, for you to know how states are doing that and to guide you, do your policies in your state, okay? But that's a result of things that are happening right now. And then down you have the policies, description of the policies, even the link. You click on the link and you see the policy. So it's really to help all of our states to put down the policy that will make sure that we are going to accelerate clean energy. Tetsui, let's try to put something on the map with all the production, in fact, if you could. So you can see there is some plants, there are plans, some plants for refineries for sustainable aviation fuels that are being implemented, that are being commissioned. Some are already producing. And so we have a map that shows the volume of the fuels and what stage that is, if there is plan, if there is effectively producing, etc., etc. And that's the map. And if you click, the green, I don't know if you can see the green dots are the ones producing. So if you, get one of the green, to see how it's. So if you click there, you will see which one is this refinery, how is things, what is the feedstock, everything is there, guys. So you know what's happening in the world, and that also gives us, for example, aviation different from other sectors, just not relying on the production to come and then we'll see. We are, with our airlines, we are really pushing for the airlines to do off-take agreements. So you would have the demand in the future pushing for the producers to be really sure that they have to produce that fuel, that fuel will be bought by someone at the end of the day. So this offer and demand signal is there. It's very important. So please have fun with the trackers. There's trackers for everything. Promise me that you're going at least to try the trackers. And of course, if you have any suggestions back to us, please send the suggestions back to us. We really want to improve that tracker, and it's to serve you. So if you have any suggestions, please bring back. Okay, maybe Tetsuya will have to go back because I think I'm going a little bit beyond my time here. But anyway, we put the next slide, please. Let me talk to you so you can see all the good progress. Imagine, this is a brand new industry. Look at the numbers. We have 0 airports distributing SAF. Now we have 160 something and 30 something. You know, how many feedstocks are, so I will explain how we do with the feedstocks. We can have waste, we can have bio, we can have even now e-fuels. We're looking into e-fuels. And all those feedstocks, they are classified, their emissions factors, comparing with fossil fuel, they are there. This is an immense work that we are doing. I'll be showing that. Tetsuya, can we have the next slide, please? So, I talked to you about this inventories, this MRV, That has started because of Corsia. When we reached the first, when we established the very first goal, remember, 2010, we said in 2020 will be carbon neutral growth. We knew we could not do that only within the sector. So we looked into many possibilities to complement the reduction of emissions in case we would not reach there. So what did we do? We looked into emissions trading, taxes, offsetting, and we saw that the most economic, the ones that made more sense, the most practical one, the ones that would more deliver for the developing countries was a global offsetting, because we were asking that those offset programs be mainly on developing countries, okay, with that scheme. So we established Corsia, but Corsia does like that. Here is the line in 2020. I cannot go beyond the emissions in that line. But to know if I reach the line or not, if I'm an airline, I have to do the monitoring. That's the monitoring I told you. And it's so successful now. So because of COVID, the levels that we were in 2019 have not yet been reached until 2023. So the offset didn't happen in practice. We prepared everything, but we are below the level still. So by the time we reach that level and surpass this level, we will start offsetting. So we are not peaking from there. From there we want to decrease, okay? That's very important. But Corsia also does 2 things. One, for the offsetting, you have to compensate with the market. You go outside, you buy emissions units that are published, and I'll talk about that. But you also can do that by using sustainable aviation fuels. So if you prove you're using sustainable aviation fuels, then you can offset, instead of offsetting with carbon market units, you can offset with the same tone on benefits on CO2 by SAF. So let's have the next slide. So this is how we cover the themes for the sustainability for the units, right? I cannot see from here which one. Yes. So when we do compensate with sustainable aviation fuels, we only consider sustainable aviation fuels if you pass those criteria, okay? If you don't pass, no sustainable aviation fuels. Why? Because for us, environmental robustness is the most important thing. So it's not someone coming from the corner and say, oh, I have here a sustainable, it's not like that. It has to go through that criteria, has to be certified by a certification scheme. And even the certification schemes, we approve those schemes that can certify the fuel in ICAO, okay? So this is the criteria. And behind that, we have many publications. So I am state X, and I want to produce with sugarcane, okay? So I have 2 publications. One that this state will come and propose it, but it will be a global approach with the methodology. Or I can come and say, I want a specific approach for me because I do it really, really more sustainable than the average. So you can have the two publications, or you use a general factor, or you use your own state factor, okay? And those publications are there. If you are not at least 10%, don't even start because you are not a sustainable fuels. If you are, you have to look into the water with the content of CO2 in the soil, blah, blah, all the scale, okay? So for Corsia, you have to do all of that. It has to be third-party verified, and you will report back to ICAO on that tone. And then you can compensate your emissions with that tone. Or, then it's the next slide, you will go in the market and you are going to buy offset units, ton of CO2, okay? But also, you don't just go out there and go to Johnny's file and say, Johnny, send me a few tons of CO2. It's not like that. In the same way, we have the criteria. We have a specific group that is composed by many states that are elected by our council to analyze every program to the different phases, of course. So we are entering the first phase next year, and we have a few programs that we have elected that will be producing the offsets to the Corsia. Now, caveats. For the first phase of the Corsia, we estimated with the growth that we are going to need more or less 100 million tons to compensate. That's our estimate. Nobody knows the future, right? But that's our estimate for the next 3 years. However, those programs that we have already approved, and there is still 1 year for more programs to be approved, they could potentially already give to Corsia 1 billion tons, okay? So you need 100 million tons. You're going to get 1 billion tons. So what happens? Not all of those things will go to Corsia, right? Other sectors might require that. That is why one of the discussions that is so important here in this conference is Article 6 and the issue of authorization. It's like, it's not enough that we go through all that scheme, that we go and discuss, that we approve those schemes, that we analyze every single program to see if they can be fit for purpose, that we produce that list in ICAO. But if the state does not authorize that to be used under Corsia, that could be put under the NDCs. So it's not international aviation. I cannot double count. So the authorization is something fundamental for the voluntary market, because that really ensures them that they can do the investment and, you know, come back with those tons for the aviation. So they have an incentive to do that. And we will not have the issue of double counting or double charging, which is also a big issue for aviation. We will have, that's a very exciting topic. We can stay here forever, but let's move a little bit more. So it's very important as well that we look into the capacity building. I said to you, remember, there were all those elements. Capacity building is a big one. And we are so proud of the program that we call ACT-SAF. It's Assistance, Capacity Building and Training for Sustainable Aviation Fuels. In, less than 2 years, there's already more than 200 partners with us, states and industry. And ACT-SAF it's really, we have with us, so imagine, we are aviation, eh? We are talking now about energy, sustainable energy. So I need the people that understand sustainable energy, not just aviation. So that's why we created ACT-SAF, and our partners come from the producers, the people that do the certification of sustainability, etc., academia, all of them are with us. Why? We have the series, the training series. It's all hands on deck, as we like to say in aviation. We call the guy that builds the refinery to talk about building refineries. We call the guy that does the certification of the feedstock to talk about certification of feedstocks. So it's a one-on-one interaction with those that really make it, those that really are doing it, which is very important. Also, we said some states, remember the marathon, some states have not yet started. They need to buy the shoes, to buy the shorts, to buy the t-shirt, to run. They don't know if they need a cap or not, but that is starting to talk about SAF. That's the feasibility studies. We are now going in 20 African states. We already did 5. We are going on 20 states, most African states, to do feasibility studies, to tell them, here, this is the feedstock that's your potential. Here's the production process that is more fit for purpose for you. And then we do some economic business studies to say if that's bankable or not, before they start entering in the development phase of the project. This is very important. And the feasibility studies have been very, very crucial. ICAO does not need to do all the feasibility studies. That's we have our ACSAF and we have the templates. So we are partnering with others that will be using our templates to make sure that it's harmonized, that it's using our criteria for SAF and everything else, but they can contribute with us doing that. So ACSAF is thumbs up and it's working beautifully, guys. It's so exciting for us. So next slide, you'll see how we are going to match then the ACSAF and the next thing that I'll be talking to you about, which is the Finvest. So Finvest Hub is something we agreed to do under the FAF, under the Assembly, to help states to have access to the clean energy money. Building those refineries was estimated from start to be $3.2 trillion US by 2050 for us to reach the amount of clean fuels we need. It's a lot of money, and we need to have access to that money to decarbonize such a difficult sector to decarbonize. So we are now putting that platform, that's a matchmaking between those states that have the potential for production and have those projects with those that can finance the projects. We have the goals, we have the framework, we have the readiness, we have the willingness of the states. Airlines will, and the private sector are saying we will get into that pool of financing too. So it's moving fast. We are operationalizing now the Finvest so that we can really, really deliver. Last but not least, I need to talk about something very serious. In many instances, we have seen over and over the issue of taxation on aviation to pay for the the decarbonization on other sectors. Again, guys, you have seen how many action aviation has to take. We don't have the money to decarbonize even the sector, to say if you take this money from the sector to put in another sector to decarbonize, it's not going to happen, right? And what we see with a lot of alarm, I think all of us can contribute and should contribute, but what we see with alarm is that the proportionality when they talk about taxation on aviation is just not there. For a sector that's responsible for 1.3% of the emissions, the financing goes beyond 50% of the bill sometimes in those calculations. So we give a big heads up here, mainly because, you know, as the president mentioned in the very beginning, this is a basic for development aviation. The way international aviation will be growing is much, much more on the developing countries from now onwards. There is where the growth rates are. So the developing countries will be the most affected by any taxation that we agree right now. So we have to be very careful with that file, because that can have so many unwanted implications. So I give that cautionary notes here. And I think with that, what I would like to do is to invite our guest from Azerbaijan. So, Vice Minister, it's our pleasure to hear you and some of the actions that you're doing in your state. And we are here to support. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, the state policy of the Azerbaijan Republic prioritizes environmental sustainability across all industrial sectors, including aviation. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has demonstrated a strong commitment to environmental protection, prioritizing ecological health alongside socio-economic growth. His administration has initiated numerous environmental projects, including the declaration of 2024 as the Year of Solidarity for the Green World, which saw the launch of several programs to combat pollution, increase forest cover, and rehabilitate natural landscapes. Recognizing global environmental threats such as climate change and biodiversity loss, President Aliyev calls for international cooperation to address these challenges, emphasizing Azerbaijan's role in the global community. By investing in clean and renewable energy sources, Azerbaijan has been strengthening its efforts toward reducing environmental impact. This commitment to sustainable energy has positively influenced the transport sector, where clean energy transformation has become a priority. Although aviation is not the highest emission sector within the transport industry, its growing role in Azerbaijan's economy brings a responsibility to address its environmental impact. As a member of the International Civil Aviation Organization, Azerbaijan is committed to reducing aviation's carbon footprint and building a sustainable future for international aviation. Our long-standing and effective partnership with ICAO has been instrumental in supporting capacity-building initiatives for clean energy adoption in aviation. I would like to express special appreciation to the ICAO Euronaut Regional Office and its head, Mr. Ralo, whose efforts in every visit and communication, whether on safety, security or other issues, have continuously emphasized environmental priorities to impetus our commitment to sustainability. Azerbaijan is dedicated to its emissions reduction commitments, aiming to decrease aviation emissions by 35% by 2030 and further by 40% by 2040. Achieving these ambitious goals relies on several key initiatives: incentives for sustainable aviation fuels development and deployment, funding research and development of lower emission technologies to advance sustainable aviation, regulatory and policy support for promoting clean airports and sustainable fuel adoption, as well as supporting international frameworks like ICAO's Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation Consortium. Today's event is especially significant and it includes the signing of the ACTSAF document on capacity building for international aviation, attended by His Excellency President Salvatore Schietianu. This milestone is the result of collaboration between the State Civil Agency of Azerbaijan and ICAO experts from both headquarters and the Paris office. I extend my gratitude to the President and all experts involved in this partnership. The ACTSAF program will enhance the qualifications of national experts and foster cooperation across sectors, transport, energy and environment to promote sustainable aviation practices, safe handling and clean technologies. Partnership with ACTSAF can also support programs that fund clean energy initiatives. By sharing best practices and aligning with global standards, we can strengthen our sustainability goals. I call upon all participants to join efforts in adopting clean energy and building capacity for the future of aviation. Together, we can achieve our sustainability goals and support a greener, more resilient aviation industry. Thank you very much.
So to wrap up our program, I'm very pleased to invite Nicola Ralo, which is the director of the Aeronaut Office, together with Massim Ziadev, which is the deputy director of the Civil Aviation Authority of Azerbaijan, to sign ACTSAF. We have microphones here if you two want to say a few words. The documents are in the table over there.
Normally, thank you very much. Normally we say states first, but Your Excellency, Vice Minister Mamadov, dear Mr. President, Dear Jane, ladies and gentlemen, dear ICAO colleagues, dear friends, I don't want to take too much of your time, but first of all, I would like to express our congratulations, sincere congratulations to Azerbaijan for joining the ACSAF program. Now you all know, thanks to Jane, what the ACSAF program is about. It's about today and it's about tomorrow on one of the most important tasks that we have, which is to decarbonize aviation, to make sustainable aviation a reality. Now Azerbaijan, thanks to the leadership and the commitment of its governments, from the esteemed President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, to the ministers, to the government, the Prime Minister. I had the chance to meet with them, with the Prime Minister, with the Minister of Environment, with the Minister of Digital Transformation and Transportation. What I saw is a huge commitment. I would like also to congratulate Azerbaijan for the intensified cooperation with ICAO in the last few years. ICAO is one with the headquarters, with regional offices, but we're one ICAO and we serve our states. And this is very encouraging for the years to come. Not much to say, other also to thank personally Mr. Nazim Ziadov for his commitment and Mr. Vice Minister Mamadov for also encouraging so much our work. It is the beginning today with a long journey of expanding the cooperation that was already very intense between Azerbaijan and ICAO to the field of sustainable aviation. It will be a journey, inshallah, filled with achievements. So to Azerbaijan, thank you very much. Çok sağ ol.
Thank you. It's really great honor to have this opportunity to be able to sign this document that we are intending to sign today in the presence of our colleagues from ICAO, our honorable guests. And we have to note one very important thing. We are persons who are dedicated to certain types of ambition in aviation. And you already know that aviation is a leading sector. We do have certain goals that sometimes some people do consider that it's impossible to realize and reach. However, by step-by-step development, we do prove that we are able to achieve these goals. And we can consider ourselves and be proud of the fact that we are poor believers. And by signing this document, I do believe that in the future, we already do have that respective capacity building and cooperation with ICAO. We will step further and will do even more work to build the capacity that we all need. And ICAO will surely benefit in that framework. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's sign.